Hey everybody, on today's episode of Toyota Tacoma DIY, we're going to be installing override harnesses so that you can turn on your reverse camera or even a front camera on at will. All right, so on this episode, I have been sent some products from a company called AnytimeBackupCamera. And they are a small company that create little wiring harnesses to plug into your factory head units so you can do cool things like turning on the reverse camera at will anytime you want to see what's behind you. So normally on the car, you would have to switch your car into reverse and then your reverse camera would come on. With this special adapter, you don't have to wait and put it into reverse in order to do that. You can add yourself a switch and turn that on anytime you want to. Now, you might be curious, why would you want something like that? And the benefit of this is things like towing, things like looking and seeing who that person is that's tailgating you so you can get a picture of their license plate. There's all sorts of really cool things you can use this for. But they've also sent me a harness, which I'm going to show you guys how to install. However, I'm not going to be installing it on my car. This does allow you to include another secondary camera. So most people will put a front camera on their car. So you can actually take an RCA camera, something that you can pick up on Amazon. I'll put some links in the description for you guys. But you can plug that in, say, on the front of your car. And then this adapter, this harness, gets wired in with this harness. And what that allows you to do is at will turn on the front or rear cameras. So in this case, it would be the rear or a secondary camera. And say you're off-roading in your Tacoma or you need to see how close you are to the wall in front of you, you can flip on the front camera and it'll help you park, it'll help you do those kinds of things. Now, these kits are not wildly expensive. That's one of the things that's so cool about these is that for just the rear override camera, say you only want to do what I'm doing, which is turning on your rear camera whenever you want to, this is only $35. And then if you want the full kit that allows you to do both the front and the rear, that's $100. And that's actually pretty cheap considering what it allows you to do. On top of that, it doesn't actually change the interface or the way that anything on your system works here. You know, you plug this in, it gets daisy chained into the harness, and you just add this functionality. You don't lose anything. So without further ado, let's go ahead and dive into this, and I'll show you guys exactly how to take all this stuff apart and get this plugged in and wired up. All right, so first things first, if you have one of these special mounts from Honda Garage, you're gonna need to take off just the ball mount portion of it. If you don't have one of these things are incredibly cool. I'll put a link to that in the description. So let's get this off real quick. All right, and so once you have that off, all you have to do is pull this kind of fascia off. And pulling it off is as simple as grabbing it with your fingers and kind of just working it off of your dash. See, not actually that difficult to get off, surprisingly. This is something that is like right in the middle of your car here, and it's super easy to just disconnect. Sometimes, if you have any problem with this, you can also use nylon pry tools. I do recommend those, especially for things like installing a dash cam. Those are definitely necessary, but for this, it comes right off. So we'll set that off to the back here. The next step is taking a 10mm ratchet and just disconnecting the 4 bolts that hold this on here. Now, once those 4 bolts are out, this should lift out pretty easily. And then you'll have full access to the back side of your head unit here. Now at this point, all that's left to do is plug in this wiring harness. So if you're like me, you're going to be installing the harness for simply the rear camera. Looks something like this now that it's all undone. This wire right here is what goes over to your switch panel. So we'll run that through all the insides here in a little bit. But for right now, we're simply going to pull out this multi-pin adapter here on the back. It's the wider of the 2 pin adapters. And then you're going to plug it in to this adapter, so one end there, and then you plug the regular end back into your head unit and make sure that clicks in there nice and good. Don't want that slipping out. And now we have this switch adapter. We're going to run this down and through the head unit opening here all the way to the left to the switch panel that's on the left side under the steering wheel. I'm going to show you guys, there's a really cool switch that I picked up for this. You can get some custom switches from a company that's popping up on the bottom of the screen right now, and I'll dive into that a little bit more once we get over there. But let's go ahead and run this down into that space so that we can run it to the wiring system over here. All right, and so what we have is it hanging out down here. This is just simply open down to that bottom space. There's no fancy stuff about this. So I'm gonna set this down here, and we're gonna go ahead and put the head unit back in. Now keep in mind when you're tightening those down, they don't need to be gorilla tight. This thing is not going anywhere. You just want to make sure that they're tight in there, but you're not stripping anything out. All right, and so once that's all screwed in, all you got to do is return your dash cover back to that space. Clicks in nice and tight. And then for me, the last thing I'm going to reinstall here is my little adapter for my phone mount. All right, so this next part is probably the hardest part in this whole installation process. I mean, and it's really not that hard overall. All you're going to be doing is taking this panel off here so that we can install a special button. This is a custom button I had made for this. You can pick them up at the link that's showing up across the bottom of the screen right now. But this button right here has a manual reverse camera on it. You can make your own custom button, so if you want it to be like a skull and crossbones or something else, you can, and it's just a push on, push off button. Comes with a wiring harness with 4 different leads on the back, and I'll get into those in a minute, but it's going to go right inside this hole right here. It's made specifically so that it will fit in our 3rd gen Tacomas. So to get this off, it's not very difficult, but I do recommend having a panel puller. This is just going to help prevent any sort of damage to the outside plastic or the inside plastic. These can be picked up on Amazon. They're in the description below if you want to use one of these, if you want to use that link to pick one up for yourself. Pop off like that. And then the next thing you're going to want to do is take out all of the plugs that are back here. Now you don't have to worry too much about like, oh, I don't know which one goes where when you get this in. You start putting it back together because all the plugs are different. They're only going to fit into one port on each one of these. So no worries there. And then once you have that panel disconnected, you can push out this little piece here and slide in your new button. And there we have it, an OEM style button installed. And it has a wiring harness like I showed you before that'll plug in right back here. Now as far as this panel here, I'm going to set this off to the side because I need to do some wiring down here in order to make all this stuff work. Now this part is, in my opinion, the hardest part, especially if you're not super comfortable with wiring. First off, we already run the wires down here. So you've got your red and your black wire that come from the whole dash assembly. Set those right there. All right, so what we're going to be doing now is wiring everything up. And so we've got these 2 wires coming from our dash. So we have our black wire here and then our red wire. And then on the back of our switch, we've got 4 wires. Now in this setup, you only have to use a couple of these wires unless you want to add some kind of fancy additional functionality, which I'll explain what it is on this, but I'm not going to be doing it on my car. So that part of this will not be included in this kind of instructional video. But what you're going to be doing is running this black wire right here to the green lead on the switch. And then you're going to be running the red wire that's right next to the green wire to the red wire that's on coming back from your switch. And then finally, you're going to take the black wire coming off of the switch and you're going to ground that. There's a really good ground right underneath this panel here. You can actually get to it without opening it, anything like that. It's right behind the fuse panel. I'll show you that once I wire it up. But let's go ahead and get some crimp connectors and some heat shrink and wire this all up. Right, and all that is wired up. So at this point, let's take a look at the ground that I was talking about before. So you see this fuse panel right down here, and this is the ground that I was recommending for grounding out this whole system. As you can see, I've actually got two things connected to it right now. One is this reverse system, and then the other one is my dash cam. I do have an install video for that if you guys have any interest in hardwiring a dash cam. But now that that is all wired up, the next thing that you'll want to do is test it. So I went ahead and tested this already just to make sure that it works, and it does indeed work. I will show you guys that here in just a minute, but the last thing I want to do before I button all this stuff back up is, as you can see, my heat shrink is not all on here yet. It's not tight and tidy, so I'm going to do two things. I'm going to heat up this heat shrink, tighten that down, and then I'm going to use some Tessa tape. This tape is awesome. It's like wiring harness tape, and tape all this up so it looks really nice and clean and original to the car. You got Okay, all right, so now I have got that all Tessa taped up. As you can see, I've left this wire out, and this wire is actually for running power to the light that's inside this switch here. Now the switch should illuminate when the reverse system gets turned on, even if you don't wire that up. But what this will allow is it'll allow this to get some power when you turn on your headlights so that the switch itself stays lit up at night. Personally, I don't think it's that important. It's not that important to me, but what you will want to do if you want that functionality is to find a power source that comes on with your headlights. You should be able to find a wiring harness for this truck and use that as a reference, and then simply splice this wire into that wire so that it knows, hey, I've got some power. That means the headlights are on, and I need to run power to the switch. Now, since I'm not doing that, all that's left to do is plug everything back in and put this panel back up here. I'm getting excited. This thing is pretty much done at this point. All right, and there you have it. The switch panel is returned. Now let's have a look at the reverse system and how this all works now that we have this connected up. Okay, so I'm guessing you guys at this point have a pretty good idea what this thing is gonna do. But just some information for this. This will not work unless you have your car on the run setting, which is the setting right before it would start if you had like a key ignition. But if it's the push start system, it's just 2 presses without your foot on the brake. That'll put you into the run or accessory mode. Or your car has to be on. So it has to be in one of those 2 scenarios, otherwise the button will not work. So I'm gonna go ahead and turn my car on here. And so now we've let that start up, and as you can see, the infotainment system has started up here, and let's go ahead. I'm not gonna put my car into reverse. The reverse gear is in park. There's no funny business here. And go ahead and press this button here. And there we have it. The reverse camera is now on while the car is in fact in park. So let's go ahead and take a look down here. As you can see, it is in park, and the reverse camera is on. How cool is that? So I'm going to go ahead and turn it off, turn it on, turn it off, turn it on, turn it off. Pretty cool stuff. So let's head back into the shop and we can wrap this up. All right, so that wraps up this episode of Toyota Tacoma DIY. I hope you guys found this helpful. A big shout out to the folks over at AnytimeBackupCamera for sending me this product. They did send this product to me for free in exchange for doing this DIY video, so hopefully this helps you guys understand how to install this, and it looks like a worthwhile mod to use. If it is something you're interested in, head to the link in the description below and let them know that I sent you over there. Let them know that Classic Mini DIY sent you over to their store, so they know people are seeing this video and the agreement worked out for them. But I hope you guys enjoyed it. Thanks again for watching, and the next episode we'll be getting back to the Classic Mini DIY stuff and of course the main focus of the channel, but until next time, until the next mod on the Tacoma, enjoy those Tacomas and motor on.